I'm going to speak today about heroes and heroines, women and men. The topic has been on my mind, and I actually had in mind to say something a little different, but I feel because of some things I've experienced, and maybe while it's impressed upon my mind that maybe I should speak a little bit about what a hero or a heroine is and how I've experienced it. Some of this will just be my opinion, and I'm not going to get extensive into details as to people that have any names associated. But if you understand a little bit about me, my family, my background, some of you will be able to put names to some things I'm going to talk to you about, and you'll understand maybe better. Maybe another time I'll spend time individually or in more detail, but I don't think so tonight because I've got a lot of things that I've thought about. For one thing, I'd run out of time. I know the longer I go, the less attention I gain. So I'm going to just try to keep it in a general realm, but with some specific things that I've experienced over the last few days that have prompted me to think about this topic. Yesterday, I went to a funeral of a nephew, and it was interesting. This is my sister's son. He had died suddenly of cancer. Found out that he had cancer just before Christmas, and here it is, not even mid-February. The 8th of February was his funeral. And so the cancer was very fast-moving, and because of that, it caught a lot of people off guard. I've experienced that before with my wife's father and some other people that I've known. Some have that cancer and other sicknesses linger a long time before they die. Others of them seem to go quite quickly. I don't understand all of what I need to know about the timing of all those things, but what I wanted to speak to concerning my nephew's funeral is that I didn't know him very well. He spent his childhood days a little closer to where I was, but I was away from the valley that I grew up in, and while he was living there for most of the time, because I was going to school and I was married and trying to learn my way through life, and so I wasn't around him all that much. And then he moved to a different state up in the Boise area, which was several hours drive, 5-6 hours from where I lived. And I didn't spend a lot of time with him. Well, I won't go into more about the what if I had kind of thing, but I didn't spend a lot of time. And the thing that amazed me in yesterday's funeral was when I walked down the hall from the family room where they have a family prayer before they take the casket down to the audience, which is a waiting congregation, whatever. And when I turned the corner, kind of following the family in, I turned the corner and I was amazed, absolutely amazed at the number of people that had come to that funeral. I don't think I've ever seen more people at a funeral. Well, that said something to me right there. That said something to me that those people probably knew a whole lot more about him than I did. And that his life was impactful. Even though he died quite young, he wasn't even 60 years old. He had remained active, and and doing the things that he needed to be doing and engaging with his kids and lots of other his children's friends and various people, athletic programs that he was affiliated with, and loved coaching, especially basketball. In fact, there was one of the speakers that stood up and said, as part of his speech, he said, "Well, all of you that are here today because of some influence that Jeff was his name, that Jeff has had on you in athletics, basketball, and other kind of athletics things. If that was your way of getting to know him, will you all please stand up?" And I was flabbergasted. The people started standing up all around me. And I turned and looked, and it went clear back into a gymnasium where people were. And there were people standing, I won't say half the audience, but maybe a third or a fourth at least. And there were probably 700 and some odd people there. I would guess there to be about that. I was impressed that whole basketball teams that he'd coached, the whole team would get together, had gotten together and come to the funeral. And they were all just such impressive boys. And I got to meet some of the other people that, not just briefly met them, but some of the other people that had come to know him. Then his children spoke at the funeral and said some things and prayers and whatnot. I just came away thinking, wow, he accomplished a lot in under 60 years. I've lived quite a bit longer than that. I'm sure I haven't had that kind of influence. So it made me kind of adopt him because I wasn't aware. I suddenly kind of adopted him as a hero because of the influence and the impact that he'd had on other people's lives. Now, if you look the word hero up in the dictionary, it says something to the effect that someone who is noble and has admirable qualities. Well, the more I heard, the more people I talked to, the more I realized that they were all attracted to him, and he had influence on them because of those noble qualities. And his children related how he had taught them how important it was to believe in God and follow his teachings and cling to the gospel principles of the restoration. And I was so impressed. One of his sons had to come home for a mission to be at the funeral. And after the funeral, he was going back. It turned out that he was going to the same mission that his dad had gone to years and years earlier. And I thought, well, that's maybe a little sign that the work's going to go forward, maybe in the same way in the next generation as it did in the last. But anyway, it was inspiring, and I gained a new hero. And I've thought to myself, isn't it sad that I waited till his death date to come to realize that he had heroic qualities? I think it's too bad that we don't become acquainted with those, even our relatives, as much as we should. So I'm guilty there. Then as I thought about heroes, I thought, who are my heroes growing up? Well, I had some good coaches and some that I really learned a lot from because they took a special interest and they seemed to care. They were fun to be around too. But they were good examples of good men. And if they made mistakes, they owned up to them and apologized for them and held their head up and weren't afraid to tell you what mistakes they'd made. So I think that's another quality of a person that has a noble character. admirable attributes like a hero does or a heroine. And I don't want to just make it seem like it's all about the male species here. Some of the people I admire the very most are women. I think to my grandmother who had 16 children and died from complications of childbirth when she was just a little over 40 years old. My mother never did get to know her. She was 2 years old when she died. So I didn't know her either. But I know of her family. I got to know the aunts and uncles. And I've seen the posterity. And she's a commendable woman. I've learned a little bit about her. And we had a big picture of her in our house growing up that my mother didn't hang out that much on the main walls, but she had it in a place where she could go and spend time. It always made her a little sad on Mother's Day that her own mother had passed away before she even got to know her. My mother, of course, is another one of my heroes. You've heard me talk on these videos about the influence she had on me, so I'm not going to go into all of them. But she took some time. She gave up a lot. And she was aware of her calling. She was aware that she had a job to do. When she brought children into the world, the job wasn't done when the baby was born, or even when they could walk on their own, or even when they left the house as an 18-year-old or 19-year-old. She was remarkable. My wife carried our own children. We have 6 of them. 6 times 9 is 54 months of pregnancy. And that doesn't even scratch the surface of the sacrifices she's made that I've witnessed personally on a daily basis for those 6 children. Now their spouses and their great-grandchildren or grandchildren and great-grandchildren now that we have 6 of those. And I'm sure there'll be more. Again, I won't go into the details. I don't have time for that. But from sun up till sundown, my wife worked for our family. Sacrificed. Got up early in the morning at one of her jobs and went to clean toilets and do janitor work and sweep floors and vacuum all day long, even with arthritic hands, to the point where she would just give out at night. When she came home, but she was trying to do whatever she could to supplement the income so that the kids could have some more money. I had a job, but she wasn't afraid to go to work. She babysat other people's children. For a little while, she waitressed for a lot while we were going to school, but even afterwards, somewhat, to try to make ends meet. Those were not glamorous or good-paying jobs, but she sacrificed. And I saw it, like I said, on a daily basis. I knew of her love. And she's a hero, a heroine of mine. I love her. I told her today, I've got to change the way I'm learning a little more about love and what it really means. I told her today I need to maybe say, I love you, sort of, because she's often said, if you love me, why don't you do this and do that a little better. And she's got a good point. And so I've looked at the characteristics and tried to learn those about what makes up love, charity. We'll get to it. I like to keep promising. But I've come to realize that I'm short on some of those virtues. So when I think of loving her, I think, well, I love her sort of, because if I loved her completely, I'd iron out every wrinkle and every virtue that I had and do it right, which is my goal, but I haven't got there yet. So anyway, a heroine. When I was a little boy growing up, it must have been early teenage years, out there on the farm with no neighbors around or whatever, or the neighbors were there, but they were, like I said, a half mile to 2 miles away and few and far between. But those neighbors I learned from too. And here's an example of the kind of infatuation that a young boy has. There was a neighbor boy, grew up on a dairy farm just like I did, a couple of miles down the road, 1.5 miles at least. And he was quite a lot older than me. I would guess somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe 15 years older or more. But he had joined the military and gone in as an officer, and had become an airplane pilot in the Air Force. And he flew fighter planes. It runs in my mind that the fighter plane he flew was an F-105, I want to say. I'm not all that acquainted. Some of you military people would know better, but I think it was an F-105. And I'd be out there in the field irrigating or taking care of cattle or whatever, usually in the summer months or late fall. And I would hear this roar coming from off in the distance. And this fighter pilot, his name was Keith, was his first name. Anyway, he would somehow break out of his holding pattern or wherever, and he would come roaring over that little farming community, I guess just to pay a tribute to us all or let us know that he was thinking about us. But he would come roaring over that. And just that fighter jet, and it would be down low, so low that you'd think it was going to wreck, and it would just roar over the housetops. Seemed like it was that close, but it was up a little more than that. But it would just roar, and then he would disappear off up into the distance to the north of us, and then you could see him doing a big U-turn up in the sky up there, and he would come back and he'd roar over us again. And then he would usually do another half. We'd call it a half pass, because this last time that he would come through, he'd get right over the center of the farming community, this little farming community we call Lanark, Idaho, and he would point his nose to the sun and just take off straight up. And he'd usually roll the plane 2 or 3 times as he was going up, and then he'd be gone. Well, you can imagine what impression that made on a little 13-year-old or whatever I was. But I thought to myself, isn't that neat? He's kind of one of my heroes, and I didn't even know him. But it was just one of my heroes, because to think that some little farm boy growing up on a dairy farm just like me could learn how to drive one of those things and do what he did in it. And I thought, holy cow, I wonder if I could ever do something like that. Anyway, I never got to know him all that well. Some of my older siblings knew him better and verified that he's a very good person. And I followed him a little bit after he got out of the military. He succeeded in a lot of things that he did in life. He was a tire, not a salesperson, but worked in the in the upper management of one of the major tire companies, Michelin Tires. So I thought, well, when I was a youngster, he was one of my heroes. And before I get too far away from the women in my life, because I've got some daughters and some other women in my family that I'm aware of that have gone through trials. Some of them have had some really difficult things to overcome. There's been things like divorces, things like being unable to have children when you wanted them, like with every breath you took. Or having a spouse pass away early and leaving you with kids to raise and all the responsibilities that comes with earning a living and taking care of a family on your own. Some of my extended family have had tragic accidents that they've had to work through and overcome. And I could go on and on. I've had sons that had trials and overcame them, and they're still overcoming them. So am I overcoming some of mine. I've got a lot of things to fix. Let's put it that way. But I'm not losing hope. I keep plugging away and trying to do things every day that just makes me a little better person. I don't think I would be classified as anybody's hero, but that's not really my goal. My goal is not to be the hero. My goal is to be the kind of person that would make them think of me maybe as a hero. So somebody that they thought was noble and had good attributes. Isn't that what we all want to do? Is have good attributes. We don't want to be mean or vicious or cause problems for others as we go through life. So if I'm not a hero of yours, it's okay. You can find heroes that'll set a better example for you than I will. But at the same time, have a good hero, one that you can emulate and look up to and take you in the right direction. I've seen heroes that a lot of people say they have in the athletic world. Well, keep in mind, those heroes are getting paid big money, and I've seen some of them say and do some things that are just jaw-droppingly sad and show a complete lack of gratitude for the people that have put them in the position that they're in of being famous. And it's the same with athletes and actors and actresses and whatnot. Today was the Super Bowl. While we're talking about athletes and so forth, I was impressed with both teams. The Philadelphia Eagles played the Kansas City Chiefs, and it was a blowout. Philadelphia won it big time. And I was kind of hoping the Chiefs would, but the more I got into it, the more I started to realize, as I watched them, I thought, I like the lack of showboating and just the humility that was showed both on the field and in their words afterwards. And then what little did they talk to him before. They seemed to be humble. And the coaches too, and it seemed to come clear down through the team. And I've thought to myself, I like both of those teams. I don't care which one really wins from now on, because I got to know the team players a little bit and their coaches, and I was so impressed because they acknowledged God, and they say thanks be to God for my body, for my health, for my ability and my opportunity to do what I'm doing. And then they would go on and say that how much their families meant to them, and the people around them that played a big part in their lives and in their athletic competitions too. But they were getting paid big money, but they were humble, and that's what made the difference to me. Is you see some that get paid big money and they're just out there trying to dominate the microphone, the stage, and just I'm not impressed at all. But somebody that's maybe has a microphone, but not because they sought it out. Somebody stuck it in their face and asked them a few questions, and the first thing they did is acknowledge God and their other teammates, their coaches, their wives, their family. Humility is a virtue that heroes have, and heroines have, people in general. So anyway, that's kind of what got me thinking about heroes a little bit today, is some of those events. And while I'm talking about heroes, I asked myself the question, well, what group of heroes do you think have sacrificed the most? And I've already told you about some of the sacrifices of some of these people that I've mentioned, but I would be remiss if I didn't say I have never paid enough for my freedom, for the agency that I have and the choices I have to exercise that agency. We grew up in what we call a free land. It's getting less free, I think, because of the way things are being run, but still we have lots of freedoms. I had a friend just a year older than me in high school that was drafted into the Vietnam War and never came home. Really tall and nice looking, had a ton of potential. He never got to his 20th birthday. I think of D-Day. If you want to get humbled real quick, do a little study on D-Day. Watch some of the D-Day movies and live footage and some of the pictures that they've taken of D-Day. Read some of the journals. Look at the history of what happened just before D-Day and after it, and especially during D-Day. Nearly 10,000 people in a single day get wiped out coming onto a beach, trying to take a beachhead so that the Germans didn't control the whole world and do to all of us the same thing that they did to the Jews. Heartless. And there were people that were willing to give their lives to help to do, I'm sure, whatever little bit they thought they were doing to make that happen. And it wasn't just a few of them. Some of them would walk off of those boats. One of them is buried in our hometown neighborhood, more than one of them actually, that had walked off those boats that dropped them off on the D-Day beaches, and the water was too deep. They had big backpacks on. They never even got on the beach. They drowned in the water before they could get there. Well, you can say about planning or whatever, but they were willing to do what needed to be done, and they gave their lives for it. And I've talked to some veterans that went through some horrendous circumstances in the World War II. One of the things that I really like doing is talking to them, and when they start talking about what actually took place, how they were frightened and shaking, and people were being killed all around them, and what some of their thoughts were, and what their thoughts are now, because they just get so disgusted when people won't preserve what they fought so hard for. I've told my children I haven't made the kind of inroads that I need to make, but and I was guilty myself at one point. If we can't even vote on election day, if we don't take the time to search the details out and become acquainted with the issues and actually go vote, then all those people that lost their lives were just throwing our thumb. We're just throwing our noses too, or sticking up our noses too, because we don't appreciate it if you don't vote. That's a very minimal thing to do for their sacrifice, and yet, isn't it sad that we don't do it like we should? We don't have the zeal, and I'd have to say, not just vote with a piece of paper, but I think it was Thoreau even here that said, place your whole vote. In other words, vote with the paper, yes, but put your life into the very thoughts that you had that help you decide to cast that vote, and do it whenever you can, wherever you can, not just on election day. So I'm not going to talk much more about heroes, and I could go into individual details that would intrigue you and interest you, but I'd like you to give some thought to what it takes to make a hero, a noble life with noble attributes, and the people that, in my view, make the qualification as either a hero or a heroine are the ones that sacrifice so much, yet they keep their chin up, keep plugging ahead, even though the hurt's there. My sister that lost her oldest son, whose funeral we went to yesterday, I could see the pain in her face the minute I walked in the room. It was a gut-wrenching, I should say, picture that's kind of burned itself into my mind since it happened. And when I saw that, I thought there was a mother that lost her first child, and she's hurting. But I know her well enough to know that she's going to bounce back. She's going to be fine. She's going to lift her head. She's going to do what's necessary. And this Jeff's wife, her name is Pam. I talked to her. She talked to my wife. Bless her heart. She wasn't weeping tears when we talked to her. I'm sure she had done, but she held her head up, and she put her faith in God and said, you know something, there's some things that we don't understand, but we're going to accept what's happened, and we're going to do what Jeff would have us do, and that's go on and show that we love the Lord, that we're willing to do what he said. In fact, one of his kids said that was his top wish for all of his family, was to love the Lord and show it through living the gospel. Well, is it any wonder there were 700 and some people in the room? It's still hard for me to believe. But anyway, don't work to be a hero, but live the kind of life that would make you a hero. If you sense the difference in those two words, or those two terms, just let it come to you by being humble and doing good, by being virtuous and noble, holding your chin up, setting an example, being a little bit bold about what you believe. Kind of like those football players were today. There's all kind of acclaim coming at them, and They held their heads, had a tear or two in their eye, said, "Thank God." That's my first thing to do. And the people around me and my family. I think we all need to do that more. So, think about heroes. Think about good lives, good attributes, and realize that it just happens a day at a time. You don't need to do it all at once. Little here, little there. You'd be amazed. I love you all. Don't ever forget that. I sincerely love you all. Good night.